Hi guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Stephen.
And this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to another episode of Driver Rivalries. And we're in for, it's an interesting one today.
Yeah.
Obviously, last time out, we had some pretty big names of the past couple of decades in Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso.
Two world champions.
Two world champions, a full-time and a two-time world champion. This time out, neither driver has won a World Drivers' Championship, but both have been in teams that have won the Constructors' title in Formula 1 and been the clear number two to their, well, let's say F1 legend teammate, one in Michael Schumacher, which was Rubens Barrichello, and the other recently in Lewis Hamilton, still his teammate to date, Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting one.
Exactly.
So, what we're going to do with Driver Rivalries, as usual, we will start off with looking at the stats of the two drivers and compare, and we also have a comparison of their times at their number two careers between Ferrari and Mercedes with that, and surprisingly, they are actually pretty close when it comes to that front. Then we will look at their qualifying and decide which one's the better qualifier out of the two, the race, their attacking, their overtaking, their defending, and also our last one will be looking at their performances in the wet before we conclude which driver we think is the better one out of the two. We don't always agree. In fact, usually we disagree, but we'll see what it comes to the end of that. But guys, we're going to get started off, and who wants to do stats first? Do you want to go Bottas or
Yeah, I'll
Rubens?
jump into it.
Valtteri Bottas is going to come up first. So here is Valtteri Bottas' stats.
Okay, so Valtteri Bottas has participated in 140 races. From those, he's got 7 wins, 45 podiums, 11 poles, and 13 fastest laps.
In comparison, Rubens Barrichello is 326 races and is the current, until we expect Kimi Raikkonen to beat that, the guy who has competed in the most Formula 1 races of all time. He has 11 race wins in that time, 68 podiums, 14 pole positions, and 17 fastest laps to his name. And like I said, we're now going to compare the two times, which is, where you probably most look at Rubens and Valtteri, which is at their times at top teams, being the number two driver. So Rubens Barrichello drove 104 of his races for Ferrari. He racked up 9 of his 11 wins during that time with 55 podiums, so over a 50% record on his podiums with 11 pole positions.
Meanwhile, with Valtteri Bottas, he's had 62 races at Mercedes. From those, he's won 7. He's got 36 podiums, which is just over half of the races, and 11 pole positions.
Now, looking at those stats, it's interesting. Obviously, Rubens has vastly more races that he's competed in than Valtteri, but it is interesting. Obviously, the main part of Valtteri's success has come at Mercedes, because although Williams were competitive during 2014 and 15, not compared to where they are now, things did start to tail off again coming into the 2016 season. He's only been in the Mercedes, which is a car that was capable of achieving podiums and race wins in that time, where Rubens was in a time where there was cars, it was much more accessible, or there was a higher chance that in a team outside of the top guys, which were Ferrari and McLaren during his time, to be able to achieve a race podium as well, and pole positions outside as well. But we're going to go into their qualifying, and obviously stats, neck and neck. They both have 11 poles to their name. So, Stephen, who do you think is the better qualifier out of the two?
Well, Valtteri Bottas, I think he's quite underrated out of the current grid. He's actually put in some very solid qualifying laps out of his career. Flashback all the way to 2013 in his first season. He qualified in 3rd in a rain-hit Canada race. And he's basically, throughout the years, has put in some very good laps. I think it's fair to say.
I'd agree with that. I think Valtteri is underrated, and I think it's quite easy to forget he was quite a talented youngster coming through the ranks, and his time in Williams to earn that call up to Mercedes. Yes, he was linked to Toto Wolff, but he was still an impressive driver on the grid up until that stage, and I think his qualifying really is his main asset. And Rubens Barrichello, in comparison, he had some impressive performances. He certainly did. But I think it was certainly on a Sunday that his performances were better and more stand out. I would say that Valtteri Bottas is the better qualifier out of the two, because that is Valtteri's main strength as a driver, his one lap pace. And it's impressive having 11 pole positions against a teammate in Lewis Hamilton, who I believe is a better qualifier than...
Probably one of the best qualifiers out there.
Exactly, a better qualifier than Michael Schumacher, in my opinion. So to have it in his time against that is still, pretty impressive from Valtteri. So we move on to race. And this one, I think it goes for Rubens Barrichello. Again, like Valtteri Bottas, I think his career before Ferrari is forgotten a little bit because, being in the shadow of one of the all-time greats within the sport, which is what they've both experienced, it's difficult to be a shining light within that. But there are just a number of kind of stand-up performances. I think the 2000 British Grand Prix is one that immediately comes to mind. In the Brazilian Grand Prix, even in that season, was just fantastic performance up until the fact that his engine gave way, and he always had the worst luck in his home Grand Prix in Brazil. Also, his first win at Hockenheim in Michael Schumacher spun out early, and I believe he came from 17th to 1st in that race, and just the pure emotion, and it's one of the great F1 moments of seeing him in tears on the podium with the Brazilian flag, getting that first win and winning for a great team like Ferrari. It just meant a lot to him. And
it doesn't get much better than that.
It doesn't, and I think he was brilliant in the race. With Valtteri, I would say that's my main criticism of him. I think, you'll go and explain that, I think, with Valtteri.
Well, I think he likes it when he's in control. You could say similar, not as good, similar to Sebastian Vettel, where they can, if they've been given the race, he can happily go run the race how he wants to, be in complete control and look very good. But he doesn't really, like your Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, they'll chase a race and they'll win it by chasing it. Whereas Bottas doesn't really do that. Although, that being said, he is a very good racer, I think. I wouldn't say he's, I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying he likes to be in control. He's had some pretty good moments throughout his career, especially at Williams as well. Getting some good podium finishes. Beat his teammates in every single season at Williams.
It was obviously, Felipe Massa, I think, coming to the tail end of his career that has that as well. And he wasn't the driver that Massa once was pre his accident in 2009. I think you're spot on in terms of where Bottas is. He's very good when he's managing. And when we saw Bottas 2.0, as it's fondly described, at the start of the 2019 season, that is when Valtteri Bottas is at his best. And he showed a level of consistency. And I think when Bottas is at his best, he's a very consistent performer. But with Rubens, he also was a very good racer. He could do the... He probably was the opposite. I think he wasn't as comfortable leading a race as what Bottas was. But he was better within a race at his performances. So I think Rubens is probably fair to give this one to.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So now we'll switch to overtaking. So how would you rate Valtteri Bottas's overtaking, Stephen?
Yeah. Over to Rubens. You don't... It doesn't fill you with confidence. Like just mentioning, he doesn't really chase races. The racecraft, the overtaking, isn't quite there. He doesn't make mistakes, but he's not ambitious in his moves. if there's a gap, he probably isn't going to go for it unless it's massive, you know.
I think Valtteri Bottas in this regard is a clear level between the top guys within the sport. Even though he has the superior machinery, how often do we see the likes of the guys like Max Lewis, Vettel, Leclerc, when they're further down the field, are able to easily make up positions through the field? Especially 2018 was a terrible season for this, for Valtteri Bottas, and I think a lot of people were surprised that after that season he actually did keep the Mercedes seat.
Yeah.
Because for people, because we can use the most recent examples, I would use Brazil at the end of the season when he tried to get past Charles Leclerc before his engine blew. He was really struggling to get past him there. And I'd
be Derby as well. Final race of the season. Admittedly, he didn't have DRS, but he was struggling to make his way through the field as well.
He certainly was. And he just always seems to struggle. Monza as well, you know, when Lewis's tyres went and he couldn't chase it down. It was then Valtteri who went on to attack. And, you know, even though he had the superior tyres, he couldn't find a way to get past Charles there as well. And even, you know, a young Charles Leclerc has found a way to, you know, keep Valtteri Bottas behind him. And I think that's a real kind of footnote against Valtteri Bottas. Rubens, on the other hand, I think overtaking is a really good asset of Rubens. But his problem comes with the consistency. There are days, I'm pretty sure, it might have been Belgian 2000 when we were watching Schumacher and Hakkinen go at each other, or it might have been Spa 98. It was one of the Belgian races where he really struggled to kind of make his way through the field. And when it's not on his day, he really struggles, a bit like Valtteri Bottas. But when he's on his day, he really lights up the track. And I'll use that example of Britain 2003 because he was quicker than anybody else out there. And he then put pressure on the race leader to make a mistake because he was that quick and had that much control over his car at that stage. Was really impressive. And we can talk about Britain 2008, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the wet weather races. You know, when he was on the full wets, he kind of made his way through the field in that race in his Honda. He was lightning quick. It was. So I think, again, overtaking has to go to Rubens Barrichello. He just seems the guy with the better racecraft than Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, I agree.
Defending. Now, defending with Rubens Barrichello. I would say he was the more experienced and wily fox out of the two. He learned with time that he was difficult to overtake, but you wouldn't necessarily say that for either of these drivers, I would say that defending is a skill of theirs.
No.
I don't think either of the drivers coming up on the grid are going, I've got to get past Rubens, I've got to get past Bottas.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult. I don't think they have that air about them that people feel, I can't get past them.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a kind of a draw, I think, that round. I think it's fair to say. None of them are particularly known for their aggressive defence. They're both okay.
Yeah, they're good racers, obviously, because they're Formula One. But can you think of races that particularly Valtteri Bottas managed to keep people behind him?
He's done a couple of good rear gun performances for Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, but that's a difference. That's not defending to kind of hold a position. That's being used as the number 2 wingman to do it. Because Singapore, perfect example. You know, he was quicker than Lewis, could have got him on the undercut there, but he was holding Albon. But then we're talking about holding up Albon, who was newly into a Red Bull and was in his rookie season. Yeah. So, was that much of an achievement? It's not really. So I think a draw is probably fair on this one.
Next one.
Good, before we kind of... That's terrible.
Everyone can pass that.
Clearly not, but no. We move on to the last category that we'll compare him on before we draw our conclusions, and that is wet weather races. And Stephen, do you want to start off this one with Bottas?
Yes and no. I don't know. Bottas in the rain, he isn't spectacular. A recent example that's popped into my head is Germany in a good position, touches the curb, bye Valtteri. Going back to Canada. It's one of the stats I looked up. That is his first season. He finished third, qualified third in the rain in Canada. It's pretty impressive, but yeah, Valtteri's not known for his wet driving.
I think qualifying in the rain is different to racing in the rain because it's having that consistent level of performance.
Yeah,
and for me, Rubens manages. He's not spectacular. He's not one of these big guns, but he manages to be on when he's on the right compounds. He really takes advantage of it, and he can have, like I mentioned earlier, that 2008 British Grand Prix comes to mind. Obviously, a superb performance by Lewis out in front, but you know the way that Rubens Barrichello made his way through the field in that race. Yes, he was on the full wets when everyone was struggling on intermediates, but still, he was rapid and was going so much quicker than even Lewis at the front. That he would have eventually caught him if the race was ending. But I suppose you can say that with anything. But yeah, I just think with Rubens, he has solid performances in the rain, but it probably goes with his whole racing. On his day, Rubens Barrichello, I think, is an incredibly fine driver and a match for any of the top guys. But it's how consistently he does it. So he's had great performances in the rain, but he's also had terrible performances in the rain as well, where Bottas is just in that flat line.
Solid 5 out of 10.
Yeah, it sounds so harsh on Valtteri. I do think he's a very talented driver, but he flatters to really kind of capture the imagination.
Yeah.
He doesn't really have any standout moments that I've gone, wow, that's incredible. Or over a consistent period that makes you go, no one, even though he was his closest competitor last year, no one thought Valtteri Bottas for one stage was winning that championship.
No.
And I think that's an issue.
Yeah.
For him. But concluding thoughts. Rubens Barrichello versus Valtteri Bottas. We've gone through the stats, qualifying, race, overtaking, defending, and performances in the rain. I think if we probably go on what we've awarded, it's probably quite an easy win here. But who's your winner from this battle, Stephen?
Well, we were touching on it on that last one. That Valtteri, I just want to see more from him. He had a very impressive Williams career, being his team. You can say Massa was on his way down or whatnot. But he beat his teammates for, how long was he at Williams? 4 years?
It would be 2013 to 2016. Beat
his teammate in all 4 years. He finished 4th and finished 5th in 2014-15. I'm ceding this to Rubens back, basically. I don't know, Rubens had something about him, as you were saying, on his day, he was the best out there, lit up the track. Whereas Bottas, on his day, probably isn't going to get much coverage because he's just going about his business. Because that's what he does best, controlling the position he's in. So there's something more exciting happening somewhere else, unfortunately for him. So.
Yeah, it may be. This is maybe a harsh one to compare the two because obviously Valtteri hasn't had the end of his career yet, where Rubens Barrichello has. So we don't know. Valtteri might still kick on to another level in his career, and he's got this 2020 season as a real. He keeps saying that he knows what he's got to do to beat him, and if he does, then he can achieve something that, you know, Rubens Barrichello did. I feel probably it's a more level playing field at Mercedes than it is with what Rubens had with Schumacher at Ferrari, although still, you say that just on the pure basis that everything was behind Schumacher at Ferrari, and the only season where his teammate was pushed for the title was because Schumacher broke his leg at the British Grand Prix in 1999. Lewis Hamilton came into the team when he fought Nico Rosberg, you know, and beat him in the 2014-15 season, and Rosberg won in 2016. So that, to me, suggests that if Bottas puts in the performances, he would be given the opportunity to win the title.
Exactly.
Mercedes wouldn't get in his way. So, yeah, it's... Look, Rubens Barrichello, I think, is the better driver. The only thing that Rubens, I think, suffered from was consistency. In his own head, I think he struggled to kind of believe that he was good enough and to consistently put out the performances that would have won him race. And the top guys have to have that inner belief in themselves, because they've got to believe that they're better than everyone else. And although Rubens might have outwardly portrayed that at times, I don't think truly he believed that. And I think Valtteri does believe that, but I'm not sure he was as good as what Rubens was.
The ability, yeah.
And that's just seen. We're yet to see what the longevity of Bottas's career will be. But, you know, Rubens, to sustain performance in Formula One for as long as he did, you know, I think he raced for Sauber, Tyrrell, Ferrari, obviously, Honda, Brawn, Williams, where he ended his career. You know, that's a lot of teams to have kind of been a part of F1. And still at the end, you know, he was there beating and being competitive with his teammates within the field, like Kimi Räikkönen is now today. You know, even though he's at the ripe old age of 40, he's still competitive within Formula One, which is, you know, something that's massively impressive and can't be understated. So, Rubens Barrichello, in a long-winded way, I think, of saying that,
Congratulations, Rubens,
has won this driver rivalry.
I don't normally cede to your pick, but today I'm sorry, Valtteri.
Out the battle of the number twos, which may be harsh to kind of classify their careers as just number two drivers, Rubens Barrichello comes out on top. But that's what we've had to say, guys. Now we want to throw it back to you. Who do you think was better? Valtteri Bottas or Rubens Barrichello? Was it the quiet, consolidate Finn or the emotional Brazilian? And came across as a nice guy, Rubens Barrichello, on camera. But that's it. That's it from us. We're throwing it to you. We've had our say. It's your say. And we'd love to hear from them in the comments. But if you're new around here, or you haven't done so already, and you've enjoyed this video, what can they do?
They can like, they can subscribe, and they can ding that bell.
Ding that bell. But for now, guys, you F1 fans, keep racing.